How does a father become a stranger at his own family's table after paying for that table, that roof, that life for years? How does a calm, gray-haired man go from being our hero to not invited with one group chat message? This is how my son and his wife learned that the quiet man they erased was the one holding every bill, every loan, and every signature they needed. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Robert Mercer, but most people call me Rob. I am 59 years old, and I work as an electrician and small contractor in our town. I live alone in a small townhouse on the edge of the city. It is not fancy, but it is quiet, and everything inside it is paid for. I like that feeling, paid for. No one can take it from me. Most days, my routine is simple. I wake up early, make coffee in the same old machine, and look over my schedule. Some days I go out to the site and check wiring or help the younger guys with tricky work. Some days I stay home and do the paperwork the company never wants to touch. I have a small desk in the corner of my living room with a laptop, a printer, and a neat stack of folders. That evening began like many others. I came home after a long day, put my tool belt back in its place by the door, and changed into clean clothes. I warmed up leftover stew on the stove and turned on the radio for background noise. I do not like silence. It makes the small house feel even smaller. While I ate, I thought about Thanksgiving. It was 2 weeks away. For the last several years, I spent it at my son's house. His name is Jason. He is 32 and works in marketing in the city. His wife, Sara, stays home part-time with their little boy, Noah, and does some event planning on the side. They have a wide, bright house in a newer neighborhood with big windows and a white kitchen that looks like a picture in a magazine. I helped them buy that house. I gave them the down payment as a private loan and signed as a guarantor for their mortgage. I always tell people that it is for Noah, not for them. The boy should have a yard, I say. A yard, a safe house, a nice school. That is what a grandfather is for. After dinner, I washed my plate, wiped the counter, and sat at my desk. I opened my laptop and logged into my online banking. It is a habit now. Every month, money moves out of my account, even when I do not touch it. I like to see what is going where. There they were, lined up in the list. A transfer to Jason and Sara for part of the mortgage, another for Noah's daycare, a payment toward their car lease, all of them marked as automatic, all of them with dates going years back. I stared at my own name in the corner of the screen and then at my son's name on the payment list. It almost looked like I was paying a bill to myself. My phone buzzed on the desk. I picked it up. It was a message in the family group chat. The name of the chat was simple and safe, Thanksgiving Plans. It included me, Jason, Sara, and her parents, Gerald and Carol. They like to be part of everything, at least on the planning side. A few days earlier, Sara had sent a message in that chat, asking what dessert I would like to bring this year. She said that she would handle the main dishes and her mother would do the sides, like always. She asked if I could send some money for extra groceries. I replied that I would send it at the end of the week and that I could bring my usual pumpkin pie. There was a small smiley face after her reply. Now there were new messages. The preview on my screen showed my son's name. I opened the chat. Jason had written a long message. He said that he and Sara had been talking about the holidays, and they felt they needed a quieter time this year. He said they wanted Thanksgiving to be only their core family, just them and Noah, so they could create their own traditions. He added that he hoped I would understand and not take it too hard. Under his message, I could see the reply from Sara. Her message was sharper. She said that they needed distance and clear limits, that they felt watched and judged when I came over. She added that maybe, in the future, I would earn the right to be at their table again if things changed. Her parents were still in the chat, reading silently. Next to her message, there were a couple of small reaction icons from them that made it feel like a little show. I sat back in my chair and read those words again. Earn the right. That part stayed in my head. My first feeling was not anger, it was confusion. I tried to remember the last time I raised my voice at them. I could not. I tried to remember the last time I told them how to live. I could not find that either. I remembered last Thanksgiving instead. I had shown up early carrying 2 pies and a bag of groceries. Sara had smiled at the door, but the smile had no warmth. She told me I could sit on the couch and watch the game. When I offered to help with cooking, she told me not to worry and that I would just be in the way in the kitchen. From the living room, I could hear her talking to her mother. She said that older people always tried to control everything and that it was easier to let me sit and feel useful by paying for stuff. I pretended not to hear it. Back in the present, I read the new messages again. My stew sat like a stone in my stomach. I noticed my own name up in the chat list, equal to everyone else. But in that moment, I did not feel equal. I felt like an extra part they no longer needed. More messages came in. Gerald wrote that he understood their wish for a small family holiday and that he and Carol would respect that. He said they could always see me another time. Carol added a short line about hoping there were no hard feelings and that everyone should stay positive. It was strange. I was the only one being pushed out of the table, but I was also the one who sent most of the money that made their normal life possible. I felt something inside me become very still. Not broken, just calm, like when the power goes out and the house falls silent. You notice what is running on electricity only when it stops. I looked from the phone to the laptop screen. My own list of automatic payments was still open. Jason's name appeared 3 times on that list: mortgage support, daycare support, car support, all of them flowing out of my account month after month without a question. I thought about my wife then. She passed away years earlier, in a hospital room that still appears in my dreams. Before she was gone, she made me promise that I would do everything I could to help our son build a good life. I took that promise very seriously. I worked nights, weekends, whatever was needed. When Jason wanted to go to college, I found the money. When he and Sara wanted a bigger house, I went with them to the bank. I shook hands, signed papers, and told him not to worry. Now I sat at my desk with my wife's photo in a frame beside the laptop. I could almost hear her voice asking what was happening. I tried to imagine what she would say about that message. I did not like the answer that came to my mind. New notification bubbles popped up on the screen. Jason sent another message in the chat, this time directly to me. He said he hoped I would respect their decision and not make a scene. He said he did not want drama around Noah and that he and Sara needed to protect their peace. That part hurt more than I expected. Protect their peace. As if I was some stranger who brought trouble to their door. The same man who checked their light fixtures, fixed their outlets, crawled under their house to look at the wiring, and opened his wallet every time they called. I thought about the nights I spent sitting in my van outside their house, waiting while they were out, just so I could be there early the next morning to finish work before Noah woke up. All of that was just understood, taken in, and then forgotten. I put the phone face down on the desk and folded my hands. The radio in the kitchen hummed an old song. Outside, I could hear cars rolling past and distant voices from the street. Inside my little living room, everything was still. I tried to see it from their side. They were young, busy, and proud of their new life. Maybe having an older parent around made them feel less modern. Maybe they did not like it when I asked simple questions about their plans. Maybe they felt judged when they saw what I did without complaining. That is what I told myself at first. Then I thought about the way Sara always spoke to me when money came up. She used friendly words, but behind them there was an expectation. She would tell me that it would mean a lot if I could help with something, that it would be good for Noah, that I was the only one who could make certain things possible. She never called it a loan in front of other people. She called it support, help, love. But at the bank, when the forms were printed, the words were different. I picked up my phone again and scrolled back through the chat history. There were older messages there, requests for help with repairs, notes about surprise bills, little comments about how useful it was that I was always there. In between those, there were few real questions for me. Almost no simple greetings. Almost no photos sent only to me without a request attached. I sat with all of that for a long time. My fingers rested on the phone screen, but I did not type anything yet. I watched the small cursor in the message box blink on and off. At some point, I became aware of a quiet thought in my mind. It said that this was not a small change. It was not just a holiday choice. It was a clear statement of where I fit in their world. I was useful when I was invisible and silent. The moment I might take up space at their table, I became a problem. I do not move fast when I am angry. I move slower. I think more. I took a breath, opened the keyboard, and started to write a short reply. I told them that I heard their decision and that I would not come to Thanksgiving. I told them that I understood they wanted space and that I would also look at my own situation and make some changes on my side. I read that message twice. It was simple. No names, no sharp words. Then I pressed send. The small check mark appeared under it. After that, I turned back to my laptop and looked again at the list of automatic payments with my son's name. The screen glowed softly in the dim room. I moved the cursor to the first line with his name and rested it there for a moment, just breathing in and out. To explain how things reached that point, I have to go back a bit. Jason was always the center of our home. He was our only child. My wife used to say that he carried both our hopes in his small backpack when he went to school. We were not rich, but we were careful. I worked with my hands and came home tired most nights. She kept the house, helped neighbors, and saved every small extra coin she could. It was a simple life, but it was ours. When Jason was in his last year of high school, my wife started to feel unwell. At first, she said it was nothing. She waved off my worries and told me not to fuss. But the tired days became weeks, and then the doctor sent us to the hospital for more tests. I still remember the smell of the corridors and the way the lights hummed above us. We sat in small waiting rooms for hours, and I watched her face grow thinner. One evening in that hospital room, she took my hand and asked me to promise something. She said that if anything happened to her, I should make sure Jason had a good start in life. She talked about a trust, about putting what little we had into a safe structure so our boy would not have to start from zero. She said she had already spoken to a lawyer named Monica, a woman she knew from the neighborhood. She had done this quietly, without telling me at first, because she did not want me to worry. Later that week, Monica came to the hospital with a folder. She spoke kindly and slowly, explaining how the trust would work. She said it could help pay for Jason's studies, maybe a house later, and that I would be the person who decided when and how the money was used. My wife nodded along with a small smile. I signed where they told me to sign, not thinking about power or control. I only thought that this was one more way to keep my promise to her and to our son. After my wife was gone, the house felt too big and too quiet. I threw myself into work. I took extra shifts, accepted jobs that meant long drives, and learned new systems so I could move from just being an electrician to supervising other workers. The extra pay did not make me rich, but it added up. I used it mostly for Jason's future. Jason was a bright student. He got into a decent college in another city. I remember the day we carried his boxes up the stairs to his student room. He was nervous and excited. I tried to be light, made small jokes about the tiny bed and the noisy hallway. When he hugged me goodbye, he told me that he would make us proud. On the drive home, I kept one hand on the steering wheel and one on the empty seat where he had sat. During those years, the trust helped pay for his tuition and some of his living costs. I also sent him extra money whenever he called. Sometimes he said he needed books. Sometimes he said he was short on rent or wanted to go on a trip with his friends. I told myself this was normal. Young people do not understand money yet. That was what I was for. He met Sara at college. The first time he brought her home, she was friendly and full of energy. She talked a lot about her plans for her career and the kind of home she wanted one day. She spoke about open spaces, light floors, and a nice neighborhood with good schools. I liked that she had clear ideas. I thought it showed she was serious. At first, she treated me with respect. She thanked me for dinner, for the ride, for small things. She asked about my work and listened, at least with her eyes on me. But even then, there were little signs. When I suggested cheaper options for certain plans or told small stories about how I had grown up with less, she would smile in a polite way and then change the subject. It was as if those parts of my life did not fit into the picture she was building. Years passed. Jason finished college, started working in marketing, and then he and Sara moved in together. They rented a small apartment at first. I helped them with furniture and with the deposit. It felt good to see them start their life. Then one day, Jason called to say that Sara was expecting a baby. He sounded excited and nervous, like he had when he moved into his student room. When Noah was born, I stood in a hospital room again, but this time it felt different, softer. I held a tiny, warm body in my arms and felt something deep in my chest. I promised myself that this child would never feel unsupported, not while I was still able to turn a screw or carry a ladder. As Noah grew, the talk about a bigger house started. Jason said that their apartment was too small, that they needed a yard and a better school district. Sara sent me links to houses online. They were all bright and new, with fresh paint and pretty kitchens. The prices made my head swim, but I did not show that. One evening, they invited me to a restaurant to talk about the future. We met in a private room in an upscale family place. The waiter brought drinks and took orders. I chose something simple and not too expensive. Jason and Sara ordered 3 courses without looking at the prices. Sara's parents, Gerald and Carol, joined us too. They wore nice clothes and spoke with careful smiles. During the meal, Jason explained that the bank would lend them most of the cost for a house, but they were short on the down payment. Sara said that this was where family support came in. She said that if I could help with a private loan, it would mean Noah could grow up in a better place. Gerald nodded and said that in their day, parents helped children move forward, and that it was a privilege to be asked. I remember the exact moment when Sara slid a neat envelope across the table toward me. On the front, in tidy letters, it said, "Loan papers." She explained that the bank wanted to see that part of the down payment came from a private loan and that I would be officially part of the plan. She said the bank liked it when older relatives stood behind younger buyers. She used those words, "stood behind." I pictured myself like a wall at their back. Inside the envelope were forms already prepared. Monica's name was on some of them, which was a surprise, but it made me trust the process more. The papers described the amount I would lend, the promise that it would be paid back over time, and some conditions if things went badly. I barely read the conditions. At that table, everyone was smiling, and Jason was saying that of course he would pay me back eventually. It felt strange to think of him repaying me. I almost laughed. I signed where they asked. The house they chose was pretty. White siding, a small porch, a neat yard. On the day they got the keys, I drove over with a toolbox and a trunk full of small things I had bought for them. Extension cords, light bulbs, basic tools. Sara walked through the empty rooms, talking about furniture and colors. Jason walked behind her, nodding. I was the one crawling on floors to check outlets and flip breakers. Over the next years, I helped more than I had promised. It started with small calls. Jason would say that the mortgage felt heavy and ask if I could help with a part of it for a while. Sara would send a message about a surprise bill from the roof company or the car repair shop. She would say that she hated to ask, but that they were in a tight spot, and that I knew how important stability was for Noah. I almost never said no. When I set up the automatic payments, I told myself it was only for a short time, just until they got past this or that hurdle. I went online, entered their account details, and scheduled transfers that would move every month without me touching anything. At first, there was just one, then there were two, later a third one for daycare. Each had their own little label: help, support, Noah. I did not label any of them loan. Around the same time, the way they spoke to me began to shift. It was not sudden, it was like watching paint slowly dry, and only later noticing the color had changed. At family dinners, Sara would make small comments about my clothes or my habits. She would tell Jason's friends that I was old school and laugh when they nodded. When we were in public places, she sometimes spoke about my work as if it was something simple and rough, not a craft I had given my life to. I remember one of Jason's birthdays at that same restaurant with the private room. I arrived early and watched the staff set the table. When everyone sat down, I realized I was placed at the far end, away from Jason and Sara and her parents. I did not mind at first. I am not the kind of person who needs the center seat. But during the meal, I noticed something. Whenever the bill came, eyes turned toward me. Sara joked that I liked playing sponsor. Gerald laughed and said that I had a generous nature. No one asked if I could afford it. No one even made a show of suggesting they could split it. When I reached for my wallet, it felt like a routine everyone expected. At earlier Thanksgivings in their house, I would arrive with food and small gifts. Sara would speak in a bright voice in front of others, saying she was glad I came. Then, in the kitchen when she thought I could not hear, she would say that older relatives created stress and that it was easier when they only helped from a distance. One year, I offered to wash dishes. She told me to sit down and rest. Later, she told someone that I never lifted a finger. Little by little, my role became clear. I was a background figure who made things possible but did not belong in the main picture. In photos, I was often at the edge, half cut off. In conversations, my voice did not carry far. When Jason called, it was mostly about money, loans, or just until next month. When he talked about feelings or plans, he spoke more to Sara's parents. He posted photos of them online with Noah and called them the best grandparents. I tried not to take it personally, but each time I saw those words, something inside me tightened. I did not see myself as a victim. I told myself I was doing what a father and grandfather should do. I reminded myself of my promise in that hospital room years ago. I said that my job was to give, not to demand. That story worked for a long time. It helped me sleep on nights when my back ached and my bank balance was lower than it should have been. But sitting in my small townhouse that night, with the group chat open and those words staring at me, that I had to earn my place at their table, it was harder to believe my own old story. I began to see the pattern clearly, like wiring behind a wall when you strip the plaster away. They liked the power to invite and uninvite. They liked the comfort my money brought. They did not feel any real duty toward me in return. I am not good with fast emotions. I do not explode. I observe. I put things in order in my mind. As I thought back over the years, over the trust, the down payment, the automatic payments, the dinners, the small jokes at my expense, the long calls about money and the very short ones about anything else, I felt a new shape forming in my thoughts. It was the shape of a simple fact. I had given them not only money, but structure, stability, and chances. They had taken all of that and then stepped away from me as if I were a problem to manage. They forgot that the same hands that give can also let go. The next days after that group chat felt strange. The house was the same, my work was the same. The world outside my window kept moving, cars passing, children walking to school with backpacks. Inside me, something had shifted. It was small, but it was clear. I started to look at things with different eyes. I did not change anything right away. The automatic payments still went out. The trust still sat where it was. On the surface, life went on as before. I went to work, checked cables, filled out forms. I came home, cooked simple meals, and watched the news while I ate. But in my mind, I kept going back to those words about earning my place at the table. A few days later, Sara sent me a short message outside the group chat. She wrote that Noah kept asking when he would see me, and she suggested that we meet at the park near their house for a quick visit. The note sounded friendly, but it was short, almost like a work reminder. I told her that I would be there. On Saturday morning, I walked to the park with a small bag in my hand. Inside it was a toy truck I had found at a hardware store, the kind that looks like the ones I use on site. I thought Noah might like rolling it in the sandbox. The air was cold but bright, and the grass was still a bit damp from earlier rain. When I reached the playground, I saw Noah first. He stood near the slide, holding a small shovel. His face lit up when he saw me. He ran toward me with short, quick steps, and I felt my chest soften. I crouched down and lifted him in a light hug. I told him that I brought him something. He pressed his face to my shoulder for a second, then pulled back to look at the bag. Sara was sitting on a bench nearby, wrapped in a nice coat, looking at her phone. She noticed us and waved once. I walked over with Noah holding my hand. I sat on the bench beside her and handed the truck to Noah. He knelt down at our feet and started to play with it in the gravel, making small engine sounds. I tried to use the time well. I asked Noah about daycare, about his favorite cartoon, about his new shoes. He answered in short sentences, then went back to playing. I watched him and felt both happy and tired, like looking at something beautiful through a window you cannot open. Sara kept checking her watch. After a while, she told me that they had plans with friends later and did not have a lot of time. She said it in a light voice, but the message was clear. This visit had a set length, like a scheduled meeting. She did not ask much about how I was. She did not mention the Thanksgiving messages. It was as if that whole conversation had happened in a different world. Still, I tried once. I asked her if everything was really okay between us. I said that I did not want to be a problem. She said that things were simply changing, that they needed space as a young family, and that older people did not always understand. She added that it was nothing personal, which made it feel more personal than ever. After about half an hour, she stood up and told Noah it was time to go. He hugged me and asked when I would come to the house. I said that I did not know, but that I would talk to his parents. I watched them walk away, her tall shape and his small one side by side. The toy truck bounced under his arm. I stayed on the bench a few minutes longer, just to steady myself. Then I got up and walked to the supermarket nearby. I needed milk and bread, and I thought the walk through the aisles might clear my head. The supermarket was busy. Carts rolled past, people gathered around sale signs, music played from overhead speakers. I moved slowly, taking what I needed. At the dairy section, I picked up a carton of milk and turned to leave when I heard a voice that sounded familiar. Jason stood a few meters away, near the end of the aisle, talking to another man about his age. His back was turned to me at first, so he did not see me. I recognized his coat and the way he shifted his weight when he spoke. I stopped without thinking, half hidden behind a display. The man he was with asked something about his plans for the holidays. I could not hear every word, but I heard enough. Jason said that they were keeping Thanksgiving just for their small family this year, no big gatherings, no extra people. He said they were done with complicated older relatives, and that it was time to set boundaries. The friend asked about me. I heard my name. Jason laughed in a low way and said that I would be fine, that I always made a big show of being hurt, but that I needed them more than they needed me. He told his friend that I would calm down because I had no one else and that the money would keep coming like it always had. He said that I knew better than to rock the boat, since I had tied so much of my life to theirs. The words hit harder than the Thanksgiving text. These were the things he said when he thought I was not there. So that was how he saw me. A lonely old man, too dependent and too soft to ever pull back. A permanent helper, not a father. The other man made some light comment. I did not listen to the rest. I stepped quietly back, turned down a different aisle, and moved away. My heart was beating faster, but my hands were steady. I went to the checkout, paid for my few items, and walked out into the parking lot. Outside, the wind was sharp. I held the bag in one hand and stood for a moment, looking at the rows of cars. My mind felt very clear. There was no fog now. Jason's words did something that the group chat had not done. They closed a door inside me. He thought he knew me. He thought he knew what I would do and what I would never do. He was sure I would choose silence, because that is what I had done each time before. He thought I was tied to them by need. He forgot that I was tied by choice. On the way home, I made a decision. It was simple and quiet. I would not shout. I would not send long, angry messages. I would not show up at their door and demand answers. I would treat this like any other serious problem I had solved in my life. I would gather information, understand the structure, and then act with care. Later that week, I tried one more small step before changing anything. I cooked a pot of soup the way my wife used to make it and put some in a container. I decided to drive to Jason and Sarah's house and leave it for them, maybe talk at the door, see if they were willing to speak calmly face to face. When I arrived, the neighborhood looked as neat as always. Fresh paint, trimmed lawns, cars parked carefully in drives. I parked on the street, picked up the warm container, and walked up their path. I rang the bell and waited. Jason opened the door a little. He stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door nearly closed behind him. I saw Noah's small head appear for a moment in the gap, then vanish as someone called him back inside. I held out the soup and said I had made extra. Jason took it, but did not invite me in. His face looked tense. He said that this was not a good time, that they were busy, that Sara did not want things to feel awkward inside the house. He used careful words, but every one of them pushed me away from the threshold. I told him that I wanted to talk calmly about the messages and about the holidays. I said that I did not want to fight. He said there was nothing to discuss, that they had decided, and that I needed to accept it. Then Sara came to the door. She stayed behind him, but I could see her face over his shoulder. She said they felt I was too present, too involved, and that it was not healthy for them. She said they needed to protect their family unit, and that it was not fair if I tried to put pressure on them with guilt. No one mentioned money. No one mentioned the house I helped them get, the bills I covered, the hours I worked extra so they could feel safe. Those parts of the story were invisible for them in that moment. I felt something in me grow very steady. I told them that I understood they wanted space. I said I heard them clearly. I added that I would take their words seriously and adjust my part of the arrangement to match the new distance they wanted. I did not raise my voice. I did not ask questions. I let their own statements hang in the air. Jason frowned, as if he did not like the sound of that, but he did not say much. Sara said that she hoped there would be no drama. Then Jason thanked me for the soup in a short, stiff tone and stepped back. The door closed between us. On the drive home, I did not turn on the radio. I drove in silence, listening to the sound of the engine. The road was familiar, but the feeling was new. It was like I had walked across a bridge and burned it quietly behind me, not in anger, but out of simple self-respect. Back in my townhouse, I took off my coat and went straight to the small room I call my office. It is really just a corner of the spare room. There is a desk, a lamp, and a metal filing cabinet with 2 drawers. On top of the cabinet is a photo of my wife, smiling in the sun. I pulled open the top drawer. Inside, everything was in neat folders. I have always liked paper. It feels more solid than a computer screen. Each folder had a name or subject written on the tab. One of them had my son's name. I took it out and laid it on the desk. I opened the folder. There were several documents inside. On top were copies of the loan papers from that restaurant evening, the private down payment loan agreement signed by Jason and me, with Monica's name at the bottom as the one who prepared it. Under that were copies of the mortgage documents that showed my status as guarantor. I had kept them because I like to know what I am tied to. Beneath those, there was a short summary of the trust that my wife had set up before she left us. Monica had given me this summary so I would not have to read the full thick stack. It listed the basic terms, who the trust was for, under what conditions, and who had the power to change things while I was alive. My name appeared there more than once. I spread the papers out on the desk. The words that had felt distant when I first signed them now looked very close. Loan, guarantor, beneficiary, conditions. I traced the lines with my finger, slowly, reading each one. I saw that the down payment was not just a gift, even if I carried it in my heart like one. It was written as a real loan, with terms and options if the relationship broke down. I thought again about Jason in the supermarket saying that I would never change anything because I had no one else. I looked at the trust paper and remembered my wife in the hospital, her tired eyes but steady voice when she spoke about respect and future choices. She had not wanted our son to be trapped by money. She also had not wanted me to be trapped by duty. I realized that in all these years I had held a certain kind of quiet power, one I never thought of as power because I did not want to use it. I had seen myself as a helper with a toolbox, not as someone whose name on a line could change another person's life. But that was what these papers meant. I sat there for a long time, the room lit only by the desk lamp. The rest of the house was dark. Outside, a car drove past and then another. Inside, it was just me, the papers, and the photo of my wife watching from the top of the cabinet. For the first time, I allowed myself to think seriously about what would happen if I stopped agreeing to everything, not out of revenge, but out of simple fairness to myself. What if I stopped all the voluntary payments? What if I asked that the loan be treated as real? What if I used the rights that were already written under my name? It was not a storm of thoughts. It was more like laying out tools on a workbench before starting a job. One by one, I placed the ideas in a row and looked at them. They were not wild. They were not cruel. They were just clear. I knew I could not move forward alone, though. I had never been trained in law. I understood wires and circuits, not clauses and sections. There was one person who knew both my family story and these documents better than anyone, Monica, the lawyer my wife had trusted. I picked up my phone from the edge of the desk and scrolled through my contacts until I reached her name. I had called her over the years about small things, but not for something this big. I looked at her name on the screen, thought of my wife again, and then pressed the call button. Monica picked up on the third ring. Her voice sounded almost the same as it had years ago when she came to the hospital to see my wife. Calm, steady, with a hint of kindness. She greeted me by name and asked how I was. I told her I was fine, which was not really true, and asked if she had some time to meet. I said it was about family matters and the old trust. She paused for a moment, then said she could see me later in the week. When the day came, I left work a bit early and drove to her office in the center of town. The building was not fancy, but it had clean lines and big windows. Inside, the air smelled like paper and coffee. A receptionist showed me to a small meeting room with a wooden table and 2 chairs. On the wall, there was a framed photo of our town from years ago, when the streets were still mostly empty. Monica came in with a folder in her hands. She looked a little older than I remembered from the hospital days, just like I did, but her eyes were still sharp. She sat down opposite me and smiled gently. She asked again how I was doing. This time I shrugged and told her that things were not simple. I explained the Thanksgiving messages, the words about having to earn my place, the way Jason and Sara had spoken to me at the door. I told her about the meeting in the supermarket aisle, how I heard my son say that I needed them and would never pull back. I did not cry or raise my voice. I just laid out the facts, like laying tools on a table. Monica listened without interrupting. Every now and then she wrote a few notes. When I finished, she opened the folder she had brought. Inside were copies of the old trust documents and the earlier forms she had helped prepare. She reminded me of the main parts, speaking slowly so I could follow. She said that the trust was designed to support Jason, but it was not a blank check. My wife had asked her to include a few clear conditions. One of them was that the main benefits depended on a continued family relationship marked by basic respect and contact. If that broke down because Jason pushed me away, there were options to adjust the trust. My wife had insisted on that part. Monica said she remembered how firm my wife had been on that point. I sat back in my chair and let that sink in. At the time we made the trust, I had not thought much about that clause. I never imagined needing it. Now it stood out like bright ink on the page. It was as if my wife had seen ahead, to a day when I might be treated more like a bank than a parent. We talked also about the private down payment loan. Monica had drafted that too, back when Jason and Sara wanted the house. She showed me a copy of the agreement and pointed to a part that described what would happen if the personal relationship between lender and borrower collapsed. It did not use angry words, only neutral ones, but the meaning was clear. There were ways to call in the loan or change the terms if I was pushed out of the picture as family. Monica did not try to push me in any direction. She asked what I wanted. That question was harder to answer than I expected. I told her I did not want to harm Jason or Noah. I did not want them thrown out of their home. I did not want a fight in court. I said what hurt most was not that I had given money, but that they felt free to erase me and still count on my support, as if it were an endless river. She nodded. She said that sometimes people confuse kindness with weakness. She said the documents we had signed years ago did not force me to be a permanent silent helper. They gave me some choices. She suggested the first step should be information. She told me to get a clear picture from the bank of my status on the mortgage and any possible impact if I changed my role. She said once we knew that, we could talk about the trust. A few days later, I went to the bank branch where Jason and Sara had arranged their loan. I asked to speak with a loan officer, and a man named Luis came out to meet me. He wore a simple shirt and tie and had a calm manner. He led me to his desk, which was covered with neat stacks of papers and a small plant. I told him who I was and that I believed I was listed as a guarantor on my son's mortgage. I brought my copy of the documents from my folder at home. Luis looked them over, then pulled up the file on his computer. He confirmed that I was indeed a guarantor and that my income and credit history had helped Jason and Sara get the loan and at the rate they currently enjoyed. I asked him, in simple terms, what would happen if I chose to step back from that role. He explained that the bank would have to review their application again without my backing. He said that depending on their income and other debts, they might not qualify for the same deal or for the loan at all. He also reminded me that I could not change the past, only the future. The payments I had already sent were gone, but I did have some room to decide what I would do from this point forward. We spoke also about private loans. Luis said those were not his direct area, but he understood the general idea. He said that if I had a written loan agreement with Jason and Sara and I chose to call it due, that would change their financial picture in the bank's eyes. He was careful not to tell me what to do. He just answered my questions in a quiet, factual tone. When I left the bank, the sky was gray and a light wind pushed at my jacket. I stood for a moment on the sidewalk with my hands in my pockets. I did not feel powerful. I did not feel excited. I felt sober. That is the only word I can find. I now knew from two places that I was not just an old man sending help out of habit. I was a key part of a system that held up my son's life. That evening, back at home, I turned on my laptop and opened the family group chat again. I scrolled up to the Thanksgiving messages and took a screenshot of the main part. Then I kept scrolling further back. I saw message after message from them asking for help. Some were polite, some were casual, some sounded like demands dressed as requests. There were only a few that were simply about Noah or about how I was doing. I saved the screenshots in a folder on my computer. Then I printed them out. The printer hummed and clicked, and the pages slid out one after another. I laid them on my desk and read through them slowly. On paper, the pattern was easier to see. I used a yellow marker to highlight the lines where they spoke about me needing to earn a place at their table, about older relatives being a problem, about their plans to keep me at a distance while still pointing at my name when money came up. The next day, I met my sister Kathy at a small coffee shop not far from my house. The place was warm, with steamed-up windows and the smell of baked bread. She works long shifts at the hospital, so we do not see each other as often as we should, but we have always stayed in touch. She came in wearing her work shoes and a tired smile. We hugged and sat down with 2 cups of coffee between us. For a few minutes, we talked about ordinary things. Her patients, my work, the weather. Then she looked at me more closely and asked what was really going on. I did not give her every detail, but I told her enough. I described the group chat message, the words about earning my place, the scene at the park, the talk in the supermarket, and the meeting at Jason's door. I told her about the bank and about Monica's explanation of the trust. I watched her face as I spoke. Her expression changed slowly from concern to a kind of quiet anger. Kathy asked if Jason understood how much I had done for him. I said that I was not sure he did. She said that what I described was not just a small argument, but a deep lack of respect. She told me that I had already gone far beyond what many parents do, and that no one had the right to treat me like a tool they could put away in a drawer when they did not want to see it. I asked her if she thought I was being too harsh in thinking about pulling back. She shook her head. She said they had made a choice when they wrote those words, and choices have effects. She reminded me that I was still a person with my own needs, not just a source of support. Hearing that from someone who knew our family from the beginning mattered to me. After we parted, I walked home with lighter steps, even though nothing practical had changed yet. Knowing that someone else saw what I saw helped me trust my own view. It was not just in my head. The lines they crossed were visible to others too. That night, I sat in my small office again. I took the bank statements from the drawer where I kept them and spread them next to the printed chat messages. Line by line, I traced the amounts I had sent over the years. Mortgage help, car help, daycare help, extra transfers for holidays, repairs, trips. Each number told a small piece of a larger story. I did not add them all up. I did not need a total to understand the weight. What mattered was not only the amount, but the habit, the reflex. Something happened, and I stepped in, again and again. I placed the statements, the screenshots, and the loan documents together in one stack. I slipped them into a new folder and wrote Jason's name on the tab in clear letters. Then I placed that folder in the middle of my desk and turned off the lamp. As I lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling in the dark, I went over the steps in my mind. I had spoken to Monica. I had spoken to the bank. I had looked at my own records. I had checked my view with someone I trusted. I had not shouted at anyone. I had not sent accusations. I had just gathered truth. In the quiet of that room, I understood something simple. I could not control how Jason and Sara saw me. I could not force them to treat me like a father or to want me at their table. But I did not have to keep acting as if I had no choices. The papers in my folder were not weapons, they were tools. The question now was how I would use them, and when. In the days after that, I moved more slowly on the outside, but inside my thoughts were busy. I had spent a lifetime reacting to problems as they came, fixing what was in front of me. This time, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to act on purpose, not out of habit. I did not tell Jason or Sara anything. I did not send long messages or hints. On the phone, when Jason called about little things, I kept my answers short and neutral. There were no new requests for money in those days, maybe because they believed everything was already set for them. They were still counting on the automatic payments and on my name on their future plans. I called Monica again and asked for another meeting. When I sat in her office this time, I felt less unsure. I brought the folder with all my papers, the loan agreement, the trust summary, the bank statements, the printed group chat messages. I placed the folder on the table between us. Monica pulled out each changed. For the first time in a long while, I could see light ahead of me instead of just duty. I saw that I could repair some things in my own home, maybe take a small trip one day, or just breathe easier, knowing that my own old age would not be spent trying to hold up grown adults who pushed me away. Monica prepared draft letters and new trust documents. I went back to her office to read and sign them. She had written the letter to Jason and Sara in a calm, professional tone. It mentioned the loan by name and date, referred to the clause about relationship, and stated that the loan was now formally due for review and repayment. It also noted that I had ended all voluntary support. There were no insults in it, no bitter lines, just clear facts. The trust papers were thicker. Monica walked me through them again. She showed me how the main beneficiary changed from Jason to the new education fund in Noah's name, and how Jason's own share was now smaller and tied to basic conditions. If he chose to cut me off completely, his part would remain frozen or flow elsewhere. She reminded me that this was exactly the kind of flexibility my wife had asked for. We scheduled a time to sign and notarize the papers at the courthouse. On that day, I wore a clean shirt and my best jacket. It was the same jacket I had worn to Jason and Sarah's wedding. The cloth felt the same on my shoulders, but my heart felt different. Back then, I thought I was walking into a long future where we would all pull in the same direction. Now I walked into a building to make sure that when they pushed me away, they could not keep pulling from my pocket. The courthouse lobby was busy, with people going in and out, holding folders and envelopes. A clerk pointed us to a small room where a notary waited with a stamp and a pen. Monica placed the papers in front of me one by one. I read the lines that mattered most, then signed where she pointed. The notary watched, checked my identification, and stamped the pages. The sound of the stamp hitting the paper was oddly loud in that small room. Each time it came down, it felt like a soft knock closing a door that had been left open for too long. When it was done, Monica gathered the copies. She would file what needed to be filed and keep sets in her records and mine. On the way out, we walked down the courthouse steps together. Monica asked me how I felt. I told her I did not feel happy exactly, but I did feel straight. By that I meant that for the first time in a long while, my actions and my feelings about myself were in line. I was not pretending to be fine with things that were not fine. She told me that whatever happened next, I had done something important. I had chosen to treat myself with the same care I had always given to others. That idea stayed with me as I drove home. Later that evening, I sat alone in my living room. The house was quiet except for the hum of the fridge. I took out my phone and opened the banking app. I looked at the list of transactions. There were no more fresh transfers with Jason's name going out. The last one sat there like the end of a long row of stones. It felt heavy and light at the same time. I brewed tea and sat at the table with the letter to Jason and Sara in front of me. Monica had already mailed the official copy from her office, but she had given me an extra one. I read it again slowly. The letter did not talk about feelings. It did not mention Thanksgiving or the park or the supermarket aisle. It simply described the changes I had made and the reasons when needed, all based on written documents they had signed and messages they had sent. I thought about what their reaction would be when they opened it. I knew they would probably be angry at first, maybe shocked. They were used to a world where I adjusted to them, not the other way around. For years they had spoken about boundaries, but only in one direction. This letter was me drawing a line back. Still, I felt a tug in my chest when I thought about Noah. He had done nothing to deserve any of this. I pictured his face at the park, his small hands holding the toy truck. I told myself that the trust change was for him, that the education fund in his name would be a steady thing even if the adults around him made poor choices. I promised myself that I would still be there for him if I was allowed, but I would not try to buy my way into his life. The days after the letters went out were quiet, almost too quiet. I expected my phone to explode with calls or messages, but at first there was nothing. I went to work, came home, and waited without really wanting to wait. I slept lightly, waking in the middle of the night to stare at the ceiling and listen for a sound that did not come. Finally, one afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was not a call, it was a photo in the family group chat. Jason and Sara were standing in front of a large new house, bigger than the one they had now. Noah was in front of them, holding a small sign with some cheerful message about our next chapter. In the background, I could see Gerald and Carol near the edge of the frame, smiling widely. The caption said they were getting ready for closing on the new place and that they were grateful for everyone who believed in them. There was no mention of me, but I knew without question that they were counting on my name and my backing in the bank to make this new purchase possible. As I looked at that photo, something in me settled. The timing was clear now. They were still living in a story where I was the silent support behind every big step. They did not know yet that I had quietly stepped out of that role on paper. They still expected me to show up, sit down, and sign whatever was put in front of me. I closed the chat without typing anything. I reached for the folder on my desk and checked the note where Monica had written the key dates. The day the letters went out, the day the trust was updated, and the day the bank would review any new loan that listed my name. Among those dates, another one stood out. The scheduled closing day for Jason and Sara's new house, which the bank had already put on the calendar and which Luis had mentioned in our talk. I circled that day in red on my small wall calendar. I did not need to mark it with any words. I knew what it meant. The week before, the closing date felt slow and heavy. Each morning, I crossed off another square on the calendar. The red circle around the closing day almost seemed to glow on the wall. It was the same kind of feeling I had before big inspections at work. You know something important is coming, and there is no point rushing. You just make sure every cable is in place. Monica called to say that the trust changes were fully filed and confirmed. She said that from now on, Most of what I had built would go straight into Noah's education fund, not into Jason's pocket. Jason still had a smaller part on paper, but it depended on how he chose to act in the future. I thanked her. There was not much more to say. Luis from the bank also sent a short message. He confirmed the time and place for the closing, a conference room at the title office, late in the afternoon. He said Jason and Sara had asked that I be there to help with documents, and that the new numbers still showed my name as guarantor. I replied that I would attend, but I did not comment on the rest. In the evenings, I went over my folder again and again. Inside it, I had placed copies of everything that mattered: the loan agreement, the trust summary, the stamped changes, the bank statements, the printed group chat messages, and the letter Monica had sent. I put them in a clear order, like steps on a ladder. On the morning of the closing, I woke before my alarm. I shaved carefully, put on my best shirt and jacket, and polished my shoes until they shone a little. Before leaving, I stood a moment in front of my wife's photo. I did not speak out loud, but in my mind, I told her that I was going to handle things properly now. Then I picked up the folder, locked my front door, and drove toward the title office. The title office was in a low glass building at the edge of a shopping center. Inside, a woman at the front desk pointed me to a conference room near the back. The door was open. I could see Jason and Sara already seated at the table with Gerald and Carol. There were stacks of papers in front of them and a tray of coffee cups on a side table. Luis sat at the far end with a laptop. He greeted me politely and invited me to sit at the other end. The realtor smiled a wide, hopeful smile and talked about how excited everyone must be. Jason barely looked at me. Sara waved a hand in a small, cool way and went back to speaking with the realtor about paint colors. Luis began the meeting. He explained the numbers, the size of the new loan, the rate. He said the bank was comfortable because of the combined income and because a guarantor with a strong history stood behind the loan. Then he slid a thick stack of papers toward me and pointed to a line where my name was printed. I did not pick up the pen. Instead, I set my own folder on the table and opened it. I told Luis in a calm voice that I would sign some papers today, but not those. I said that I was no longer a guarantor and that all voluntary support had ended. The room went quiet. Jason stared at me. Sara frowned and asked what I meant. I did not answer her question directly. I laid out the loan agreement, the bank statements, the printed messages from the group chat, and the trust summary. I asked Luis to read the key parts. Monica, who had been sitting quietly beside me, spoke then. She explained that, based on Jason and Sara's own written words about pushing me away, the clauses in the loan and the trust had been activated. She said the private loan was now formally called in and that my role as guarantor had been withdrawn. Luis checked the dates, read the letter on his screen, and then looked up. In a slow, careful tone, he said that under these new facts, the bank could not proceed with the new mortgage. He said they would have to pause the closing and review everything again without my backing and with a significant private debt on record. The realtor's smile disappeared. Gerald asked if this was some kind of mistake. Carol whispered to Sara. Jason turned red and said that family should not bring lawyers into things. He said that I was taking things too far. Sara said this was unfair and that they had trusted me to be there. I listened without answering right away. Then I told them, in simple words, that I had been there for a long time. I said that I would not pay to sit outside their door while they decided if I had earned a place in the room. I repeated that they had chosen distance and that I had believed them. I closed my folder, leaving copies of the documents on the table for Luis. I told them that if they ever wanted to talk with respect, I would listen, but that my part in their finances was finished. I did not raise my voice. I did not apologize. Then I stood up, nodded once to Luis and the staff, and walked out of the glass room. In the hallway, my phone buzzed again and again in my pocket. I stepped outside into the cool air, took the phone out, and opened the family group chat one last time. Names and messages filled the screen. I pressed the option to leave the chat. The list of messages disappeared. I slid the phone back into my pocket and walked toward my car, holding the folder under my arm, feeling strangely light.